Okay, so I'm gonna start recording. So what we're gonna do in today's session. I just want to quickly go through the two exercises, the solutions to the two exercises that you guys did last class. These are already in the updated, PowerPoint presentation, so they're there. I just want to go through them quickly. They're here at the end. And we're going to start talking about the next part of the course, let's say, that has to do with Microsoft Access and the lab work geared towards you guys finishing up your application process. So the two exercises that I asked you to do with regards to normalization, kind of to wrap this up. Actually, one of them we're going to be using for the lab exercises as an example. So keep that in mind. So no, I'm sorry. No, it's one of the ones we already did. So the first one, we have this table that had to do with patient dental appointments. So we can clearly see in the table that this table doesn't necessarily comply with the normalization rules. First off, we've got some partial dependencies there, and we've got some values that might be able to be separated as well. So we need to convert that into normalized form. So because of the previous work we've been doing where we identified entities, if this is a patient dental appointments table that combines all that information, kind of probably comes to mind that we might have a patient table, we might have a dentist table, we might have an appointment table or something like that. So that kind of gives us an idea how we're going to separate this into different tables. And so basically the normalization would be something like this. We can separate it into a dentist's table, which basically has the staff number as the primary key. Got the staff number and the dentist's name. We've got a patient's table that is going to have the patient ID or number and the patient name. Those are kind of the two tables that kind of pop out that we should have. And then we're going to have a table that combines the appointments. And here we're going to have who did the procedure, the patient, the date, and the surgery that was done, or the procedure that was done. That generates this new table, and we can have a combined primary key or composite primary key with all of these fields, because we need these fields to specifically identify a record or an appointment. Now, remember that when we have this situation, and I think a few of you asked this when you were doing the exercise, instead of having this sort of weird composite key, we could just add a column, which is an appointment identifier that would identify the specific appointment, and that identifier would be different for each appointment, so we wouldn't need the composite key. Okay, so this could be one way of separating the table. And next up, we have the art gallery, and this is a bit different because what we're given here is an invoice. Basically, there's a person here that's called Elizabeth Jackson. And so Elizabeth Jackson is buying some art. And so she is buying 3 art pieces. The art pieces have an artist, a title, a purchase date, and a price. And the customer, to this case, is Elizabeth Jackson. There's some information from her, which is her address and her phone number. We notice here that the artist seems to have an identifier, identify the type of artist, and this is the invoice that's generated from the purchase. So kind of some tables that come to mind that should pop out here, where we should have a customer table, we should have an artist table, and we should have a purchase table, probably that identifies what art pieces were bought. And so we could separate this information into, first, we generate a customer table, basically with the customer ID. Now, customer ID didn't exist. Okay, that's if we create a customer table, the customer there doesn't have an identifier. Well, we can add a field for the identifier of the customer. Then we have an artist table, and here the value is in atomic because they're together. So we separate the artist's name and the artist's number. Then we have an art pieces table, where we're also adding an art piece ID. So each art piece is identified by a specific number that relates to the artist, the title, and the cost. And lastly, we have the purchase table. So how do we identify the purchase? A customer does the purchase. The customer purchases a title on a date that's associated to an artist, and it has a price. So here we have a composite key of the ID, the artist number, the title, and the purchase date. Again, if we didn't want to create this composite key, then also we could add simply an identifier there. That would be the purchase ID or the invoice ID, and that would identify the purchase, and we wouldn't need the composite table. Okay. So these solutions are here in the PowerPoint, and you can compare them to the ones you guys did in in your exercise. Now, this, let me stop sharing here. let me do some housekeeping here, and the housekeeping is going to be recorded. That way we don't forget what we're going to be talking about. So first off, we have an exam. Remember, the next exam is next Monday. Okay. The topics that are going to be covered in the exam are up to this point, up to normalization. I'm going to tell you again the structure of the exam. The structure of the exam, there's going to be a few questions at the beginning. I don't know, what could I ask? What is normalization? Give me an example of a table. What is the relational model? So everything we saw after the second exam, which is basically the relational model. And remember that the relational model is just the same things we had seen previously, but with different names. So it's tables, records, etc. And then normalization. That's basically. So I'm going to ask some theory questions about that. And the theory is going to come directly from the learning module number 3 PowerPoint. Okay, it's there. So it's going to be a few theory questions. And then there's going to be there's going to be 2 problems. One problem where I'm going to ask you to do the relational model, which is very similar to the ones you guys already did. Remember that we did the Sosa Corp one, we did the Gym Fitness one, and then you did the Netflix or whatever one. And then there's going to be one normalization. Okay. That's basically the way the exam is going to be. So you can, the learning module number 3 PowerPoint and all the examples that are there, that's the reference for you guys to set. Okay, that's on Monday. Okay, that is on Monday. I'm gonna do something with you guys that I'm doing with the other group. And with the other group, it kind of worked out. But the other group was really nervous about exams. They were really nervous about exams. You guys are really chill. You don't get altered by anything. You guys are really chill about exams. Are you worried about your calculus exam? We're not worried. Yeah. You're what? That's the way it should be. I mean, you guys are cool. Like, are you worried about exams? You're more worried about your team's winning or something like that. That's the way it should be. That's fine. That's fine. But the other group was really nervous about their exam, so I gave them some tips. And one thing I did in the other class that I'm going to start doing with you guys is, if you guys do a study guide What do I mean by a study guide? A study guide is, I just told you what things could come in the exam, the theory and all that. You've got them in the PowerPoint. If you do a study guide, and the study guide must be by hand, which is basically a guide of the things that you should review, and you bring that to the exam, I'm going to give you extra points for the exam. So if you bring your study guide, this is totally optional, I'm going to give you some extra points in the exam. If the study got something like that, and actually it's good that you show that, I mean, because what I did in the other class, there's one particular student that she does her notes like that. So her study guide was about 15 pages long with colors. And then there were other study guides that were more simple, 1 or 2 pages. I gave a baseline of extra points to everybody that turned in a study guide, but the study guides that were really, really, really well done, I gave additional points. Okay, so nobody asks questions about the topics of the course, but whenever bonuses are out, everybody's raising their hand. Luis and
like where we will not
I'm not going to put a reference of pages, just have it well done. At least I would expect 1 or 2 pages. That would give you the baseline of extra points. If it's more than that and it's really well done, then that I'll probably give more than. I think in that case I gave the baseline was 6 points, and a couple of students got 10 points, and a couple of students, and one student, which is this student, got 12 points. No, 2 students got 12 points. And their study guides were really, really well done.
What's the max?
The maximum was 12 points for that. No, that's it. Thank you for that question. No, yes. I'm asking it to be done by hand because it'd be really easy to just copy paste to a Word. And I'm old school, and the way my mother prepared me as a super soldier for exams is that we did study guides. And when you write things down, you don't know it, but when you write things down, your brain is processing them. When you copy paste, your brain isn't processing them. So it does help if you're writing down. So that's why that's on purpose. Okay. Doesn't have to be really long, by the way. Again, the baseline is going to be 6 points. It could be 1 or 2 pages. Okay, so I'm going to do that for the exam for you guys. Bring it to the exam. You're going to turn it in at the end of the exam. I'll give you the extra points. If you don't do it, it's not a problem. Okay, so what are we going to be doing next? Okay, what we're going to be doing next, starting this session, is that we're going to do a complete switch to what we've been doing in class, and we're going to be focusing now completely and totally for the next 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks, we're going to be focusing on Microsoft Access. Okay, so how are we going to be working? You guys are going to have 4 lab exercises that you need to do. These are going to be done in house. I'm going to show you these lab exercises so you see the template. This is lab exercise number 1. What am I going to ask you to do in each lab exercise? Basically, the topics that are covered in the 4 lab exercises are these. Lab exercise number 1 is creating the database in Access. Lab exercise number 2 is creating forms to input data. Lab exercise number 3 is creating queries to search for data, update, and delete. And lab exercise number 4 is to create reports. Those are the 4 things we're going to be doing. By the way, those are the 4 things you need to do for your application. So, what we're going to be doing is the following. For example, for lab exercise number 1, which is creating the database, after I finish doing this explanation and see if there are any questions, I'm going to do an example in class. And that example is going to be recorded. And there's the same example recorded from 2021 and from 2020. So we've got 3 recordings of the same exercise, and there's a YouTube video of another gentleman doing the same explanation. So you're going to have 4 different videos of the same lab exercise that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be working with the Sosa Corp example. Okay. But exactly the same thing that I'm going to be doing with the Sosa Corp example, you're going to be doing with the Hilltop Animal um, database, which you already have the tables. They're already in the PowerPoint. You don't need to create you already have the tables. And you're also going to be doing it at the same time for your application project. Okay? You have to turn in your application project complete by June the 1st. The way I've designed the lab exercises is that each lab exercise you do completes a part of your application project. Okay? So by the time you finish lab exercise number 4, which is by I think it's May 27th or something like that. Your application project should already be done because you're already doing it in the lab exercise. Okay, so it's designed that way. And that way you can start working on that and you can also ask questions. Yes, Miguel.
Page number 2, it says that it's liberal for today, but also says that it's for May 4th.
In which one? In which one?
Page 2. For all the today zeros.
Page 2 of where? Miguel?
The application project.
Let me check. Maybe that's a typo. Let me check so I can correct it. Okay, application project
Not in the actual.
in the document.
Lower.
No?
Yeah, right there.
Here.
The 6.2. This is for 6.
Stage 2 deliverable.
Yeah, it's written on the title that for the 4th of May, but also that the due date.
Oh, this one here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Miguel. This is for May 4th. Yep. Okay. Okay, and so in this is not being shown here. And so your deliverables, you've got stage 4 to stage 2 deliverable is next week. Then the next one is up to the 23rd. And then on the 30th, and then the last part, which is basically just a documentation, is for June 1st. So the lab exercises are going to be in parallel with this. So once you finish lab exercise number 4, you should have most of your application project already done. Okay. So the way I'm going to be working is that I'm going to do the exercise here first. It's going to be recorded. You guys can actually follow along if you already have access in your computers. And in the next session, which in this case is Wednesday, I'm going to give you time to do the lab exercise in houses. Okay. There is no reason why you can have the 4 lab exercises finished this weekend, if you wanted to. Why? Because all the material is there. Meaning you don't necessarily have to wait for me to do the explanation here because you've already got the videos. If you wanted to kind of catch up or get ahead, I'm sorry, on the material. Okay. If not, don't worry. I'm going to be covering in class, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to work in class as well. Okay. Questions before we start with the first one. I checked and at least one person per house has a computer with access. Those of you who don't, please, those of you who have PCs and don't have Microsoft access in their computers, please send me an email so I can link you up with the IT department so they can walk you through how to install Office 365 in your computers. Okay. Unfortunately, if you have a Mac, I believe Microsoft Access is not going to run on Mac. But if you have a PC, it will run on PC. So if you don't have it installed, some of you indicated that you did have it installed, just send me an email and I'll link you up so you can do the installation. Questions before we start off with the first lab exercise? Nope. Okay. So close this up. And this is what I'm going to be focusing on, which is basically the the Sosa Corp example. This is the one that I'm going to be doing in Microsoft Access. So I'm going to be switching between the Sosa Corp and Microsoft Access to do the explanation. Okay, so I'm going to open Microsoft Access. Oh, by the way, these examples, the Microsoft Access database is also going to be in Blackboard, so you can download it and review each of the steps we're going to be doing. So the first thing is that we're opening Microsoft Access, and so Microsoft Access is I'll say it's a development environment to be able to create a database, create and implement a database. Something very important is that when we create a database, there are many things that are going to be interacting. So it's very important for us to be very, very, very careful when we identify the tables, identify the attributes, identify what's the primary key, identify the type of data, identify the relationships. Because when we work on these types of softwares, if we get to a certain point, let's say we're in step A, B, C of the database and it's developed, and then we notice that we have a mistake and we want to correct it, it might affect the whole database to modify something. So we have to be very careful in each of the steps of the development. So the first thing we're going to do is create a blank database. And what we're being shown here, okay, is the blank database. By the way, this is important. Microsoft Access has different views of the database. Okay, it's going to show us a view that, let's say that it's the user's view, or it's the view, or I'm sorry, the data view. It's the view where we can see the data that's stored in the table or in a particular relationship or an query, etc. Then for some cases, there's going to be the user's view. For example, in a form that's going to input data, it's going to show us how the user is going to look at the form or a report. The view that we're mostly going to be working with is what's called the design view. It's the view where we're going to be doing things to design elements of the database. So notice that by default, what we have is the data sheet view. Okay, it's the data sheet view. That's one thing. The other thing is that by default, did you notice that I created the database, but it didn't ask me for a name or anything like that? So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to save this. I'm just going to select a folder here. It's important to save our database at the beginning. Call this 2022. I'm going to call this Sosa Corp version 1. Okay. Okay, so now the database is completely blank. We've saved it. And what I'm going to start doing right now is I'm going to start creating the tables of the database. So I'm going to switch over here to the I'm going to switch over here to the could you say that harder? I'm sorry.
It's the connector. As if, but this is
So we're gonna get to that. That's again, right now you're in the data sheet view. We need to go to the design. We need to do a few things to be able to do that.
Oh, okay.
By default, it's going to create a table that's called table 1. We can delete that table or modify it. So we're going to be based on this one. So we're going to be creating each of these tables that we have here. So the first table that I'm going to create is the employee table. So I'm going to create a new table. This is what you're seeing, Daniel. But again, right now we're in the data sheet view. We're looking at the data. We're going to change over to the design view. Okay. Notice one thing. By default, when I created the table, it was called table 1. Again, these are these little things about software. It didn't ask me the name of the table when I created it. But when I'm switching over to the design view, it is asking me for the name. So that when I switch over to the design view, that's where I'm going to give the name. So I'm going to try to do the tables with the same names that we have them in the example. So this is going to be table employee. And notice now that the view changed. Now this is the design view. In the design view, I'm going to be adding the different fields that the table is going to have. And I'm also going to define the data type. By default, it defines what is this first field that it's adding by default? It's an ID, and what does it have to it? You see there's a little symbol here. That's a key. So yeah, by default, when I create a table, it's going to add an auto number ID as a primary key. Assuming that I didn't add a primary key, Access is going to automatically add it for me. We can modify that if we want. So the first thing we're going to be doing is our ID is going to be employee social security number. This is going to be, I'm going to say it's going to be a number. And this is important. I believe I mentioned this before. There's a field here to add a description. In all of your exercises and in your application projects, I want these fields completed. So you're always going to add a description to any activity. So in this case, SSN is going to be the employee social security number. That's already been added. Now we have emp name. We're going to say that this is a short text, employee name. Emp address. We're going to say that this is a long text. By the way, there are going to be options here. Notice here on the bottom, I could have an option which is a yes, no. I can have one that's through the lookup wizard. I can have a field that goes through certain selected values. We're going to see how to do that as well. Emp salary. This is going to be a current. I'm going to say it's going to be a currency. Employee salary. Then we're going to have employee gender. We're going to leave that right now as we're going to leave that as a short text. We're going to see how to relate that to specific values further on. Employee birth date. We're going to put that as a date time. And employee manager, yes, no. This is going to be a yes, no format. It's going to be a is employee a manager. Employee manager start date. If it's a manager, then it has a start date.
Sure.
Yes.
All of those are primary keys.
You say that again? All of those are
All
what?
of those are primary keys or the social security number.
Just a social security number, just the one that has the key in it. So I'm making a mess here. And then we're going to have the department ID, which is going to be a number. This is going to be a key from another field, and the employee supervisor social security number. Social security number supervisor. This is going to be a number as well. And this is going to be the structure for our employee table. We're going to save it, and then we can go to the data sheet view, and now we've got the different fields that we're gonna have here. Sure. Okay, so that's the employee table. Okay, questions up to now. Then I'm going to go to the rest of the. So this finishes up the employee table. One recommendation that I'm going to give you when you're working in Access. For example, I'm going to go over here to create and say that I want a new table. Notice that the employee table is still open here, and now that it's added the new one. I suggest not having a lot of tabs open, because you might forget to save something. And if everything crashes for whatever reason, then things might be incomplete. So if you're not working with a specific tab or the information in the specific tab, then close it and assure yourselves that it's saved. So I've got a new table here. I'm going to go to the design view, and that's where it's asking me the name. So I'm going to call this table department. Can you say that again?
The table, the third one, itself, like manually, or like.
No, I'm actually, I'm didn't mention, but I'm doing it. I'm always doing control S, always to save it. If you close it, I believe if you try to close it without doing save, I think it is going to ask you if you want to save the changes. But I'm doing I'm continuously doing a control S here. Then we've got department ID. This is going to be a number. This is the department ID. Then the department name. This is going to be a short text. This is a new table, which is going to be the department table. We're right here in this one. And the department manager social security number. In a next step, we're going to be linking these tables. Department manager social security number. And those are the three fields that we have here in the department table. Okay. And the department ID, the first one is always going to be the primary key by default. See, no, if I didn't do the control S, so if I try to close it, it's going to ask me to save the changes. That's why it's very important. I'm always doing control S, because these softwares can be a little bit tricky. And so maybe the software is going to crash it might crash for whatever reason. And so you don't want your information to not be saved. So it is important to save. Then We're going to go to the project table. I'm going to create a new table. I'm going to go to the design view. This is going to be table project. And that one only has 3, which is project ID. This is going to be a number. This is the project identifier. Project name, short text, project name. And department ID. This is going to be a number. And those are going to be the 3 fields for the project table. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry, Daniel.
We're doing the same thing you found on the PowerPoint.
Yes, we're what we're going to be implementing in Access, it's going to be directly the relational model. So the relational model we have, we're directly going to be copying or replicating the tables that we have there. We've got 2 tables to go. We have the dependent table. Table dependent. I think we had defined a dependent ID. We'd removed the fact that it was a weak entity by doing that. Dependent name. The dependent gender. Okay. I don't know why, I'm going to do the example right now. I don't know why it made an error previously. So in the gender, let's say that I want predefined values for the gender. I don't want that field to be just text, and I want predefined values. So there's an option here that says lookup wizard. And there's 2 options here. I want the values to be gotten from a table, another table or query, or I want to fill in the values that I want. So I'm going to say male, female, and I'm going to put here prefer not to disclose. So it's going to be 3 possible values for the gender. Okay. The lookup field is going to be for department gender. I want to limit it to the list. This means that by default, there's going to be a pop-up that's going to say you can only select these 3 values. I'm not going to be able to input a value. Remember the things that we want to try to protect in the database so we don't make, so we try to minimize human errors. And we finish. So I'm just going to save this. I'm going to, well, let's finish this up. And so the department relationship, this is going to be short text, and I also want to define the values I want there. So it's going to be, the relationship is the relationship with the parent is going to be a child. It's going to be a spouse, or I'm going to say it's going to be a parent. Those are going to be the 3 possible values for the relationship, and I want to limit it to the list as well. And lastly, the employee social security number of the I'm sure it's the employee What did I say? Child, spouse, or parent. Okay, that would be the dependent table. I'll save that and close it, and I'm gonna go back over here to employee then. I know it didn't let me, and the employee, I'm also gonna try to do the same thing with the gender. Employee gender is also gonna be male, female, and prefer not to disclose. To list and finish. Okay. Okay, okay, so we're gonna continue. I just wanted to show you guys, I'm gonna open the employee table as an example. But right now, if we, the way we defined the gender, right now here in the data sheet view, if I go to gender, I only have the 3 options here that I can give. Same, yes.
So when I am, like, I write down the field.
Uh-huh.
For that, so when do I know which type of data I need to choose? Because there are a lot, like, short text, long text, like, how short is short and how long is long?
That's a good question. So let me go back here to the design view. And let's look at the options here. I'm gonna search on the bottom. So, okay, so short text is, it's literally like a name, for example. You need to ask to come in, Miguel, because you're late. You need to ask to come in, Miguel, because you're late. Yes. Go ahead. The short text is literally like a name, for example. Something that's probably not more than maybe three words or something like that. Long text would be, for example, an address. That would be an example of a long text. Let's say that you have, let's say that this has to do with the, I don't know, the pet clinic. And you're doing the file of the pet, and you want, and the doctor wants to write down the complete diagnosis. Yeah, like notes, for example. You may come in. All of you have on attendance, by the way. I'm gonna let you in because of the exercise, but you have an attendance, and just sit down quickly. And remember that you need to ask permission to come in. And do it quickly, please. So a long text could be notes, for example, something like that. It's something where you're literally going to be writing a paragraph, for example. Number, for example, the difference between number and long number, it's kind of when you were doing programming and you had integers and long integers. So a number, a normal number might go by the thousands, 100,000s, or something like that. A long number might be a number that has a decimal, or might have a scientific notation, so millions or something like that. And it's more precise, the large number. Date time is the typical format of usually, if we go over here, we're going to see how the format is. If we go to date, it's going to show us the typical calendar. That's the normal date time format. The extended one, if I'm not mistaken, if it's the one that has the complete and whole timestamp, that even I think has the location and everything. I don't know if you've seen these date time formats that has the day, the month, the year, the time, and the time even has seconds, and I believe it also has a geolocation. It's an extended date time format. Currency is going to be something that you want to identify as a monetary value. Auto number is the one that's going to be incrementing automatically every time you add a register. Yes, no, it's going to be a binary. OLE object, these are external objects that you can define in other tools. It's called object. OLE means object link embedding. So you can create something in another software, another data type, and include it here if you wanted to. Hyperlink, it could be literally an HTTP link that you add there. It could also be an attachment, so a file, for example. Calculated value, if you wanted to, like in Excel, if you wanted to add sum a few values or multiply values from other fields. And the lookup wizard is the one where, like the one we just used. When we use, yeah, you can define from values you want, or you might have another table. You might, if we wanted to, we might want to have a table that says gender identification table. And from that table, we're going to get the values. Okay. So you're going to select them basically according to the type of data that you're going to be using. Here, the recommendation is to try as much as possible for the data type to fit, and just be careful with the texts, because those are the ones that can generate those are the ones that can generate confusion. If possible, like we did with the gender and we did with the yes, no, or the date, time, or the currency, if possible, if you can define the predefined values, that would be best, because now you're limiting to the ones you want. The only problem there is that, so right now I put in the gender, male, female, and prefer to not disclose. If suddenly the policies of the company change, well, it's not that much of a problem, because the only thing I would need is to change the list in the database. But still, it would imply a modification.
Let's say that I have like the department name. And instead of adding short text, if it is a small list of departments, I can do that.
Yes. That's a very good example. That's a very good example. One thing that we could do if we wanted to is that right now this is the department ID, and we're actually going to link it to the database, to the table. So we don't need to do that. But that's a good example. If we wanted to include the department name, we could just tell the lookup wizard to get the department name from the department table, and that's going to be a pop-down list of whatever is in that table. Okay, so yeah, that's a very good example as to how you could use it. By the way, right now here we're using the department ID. What we're going to see is that once we do the link up of the table in the relational model, whenever we're going to input something here, it's automatically going to go look at whatever is in that table. These are things that should be kept in mind.
When you save all of those tables, do they all save on one document, or do you move them in one by one?
No, that's also a good question, and this has to do with how you guys are going to be turning in your lab exercises and your stage updates. Beginning in stage 4, no, in stage 3 of your project, you're not going to, this is very important, and the lab exercises, you're not going to be turning in any files via Blackboard. What you're going to turn in is a Google Drive with all of the files that are going to be there. So for example, if I go over here to the folder I have, this file here, this Sosa Corp V1, this is the Microsoft Access project that was created. All of the tables, everything you do is going to be in this file. Right now there's 2 because I have one open. And that's why there's a lock here, because I have to be very careful if the database is open and I try to copy the file, there's going to be problems. Once I close the database, then this file is going to disappear. So there's going to be one file where everything is there. That file is going to, depending on how much information we have and how much data we input and how many tables we have, queries, etc. This is going to be a large file. That's why you're not going to be uploading it to Blackboard. From now on, what you're gonna turn in is a Google Drive link where you're gonna have everything there. But by the way, I'm gonna recommend something. Well, it's not gonna be a recommendation. Let's do it this way to be easier. Create a Google Drive folder with the name of your house, okay? And within that folder, have another folder that says application project. Then another folder that says lab exercise 1, lab exercise 2, 3, and 4. And always turn in the link to that folder, and I'm just gonna open the folders inside. That'll be easier. Something very important when you create that Google Drive, to give me access. Give me permissions to, you need to add that because by default, if you create the Google Drive and you send the link without permissions, I might not be able to open it.
How do I be access to the Google Drive?
We literally do this. I'm actually gonna do it here because I don't know if you guys are familiar with doing things in Google Drive. Remember, all of you have access to Google tools because you have a SETIS account. Yes. Email jorge.sosa@setis.mx. So you go to your drive here. This is also going to be recorded. So you go to your drive and you create, let's say, a new folder here. That folder is I'm gonna call this DAO example folder. And it's created here. And then literally, if you're using Chrome, I'm not gonna do it with this one because I have it open. I'm gonna do it with this one. Literally, I'm gonna create over here, I'm gonna create a new folder that's called lab. You can just call it lab 1, for example. And I click on the folder, it's empty. Literally what you do, Daniel, and the rest of it, you just literally drag it here and it's gonna upload to the, if you're using Google Chrome, you can just drag and drop. If you're using Explorer or some other Safari or whatever, I don't think that's gonna work. But if you use Google Chrome, you just drag and drop it there. And the important thing here is that this folder, you have to go here to sharing. And you're gonna add me there with my email address. And then you're just gonna say copy link. And this link that I just copied, that's what you're gonna turn in. And everything is gonna be there. Just upload everything there. And it'll be easier. It'll be easier for you guys to turn everything in. Yeah, because I want us to not have problems with you guys trying to upload the files and they're going to be too large, and that's going to be a problem to upload to Blackboard. So just do it there. Okay, so we've got a couple of steps more here to finish this up. We've got one more table, which is the table in the employee project table. Design table employee, which is the table that relates the employee and the project. So what we have there is the employee social security number. I'm going to say that this is a number. And then we've got over here the project ID, which is also going to be a number. And this is going to, and well, lastly, the department ID. And the way we define this is that both employee social security number and project ID, both of them are primary keys. So notice that there's a button here on top that says primary key that sets the primary key. So the way we select more than one field to do a composite primary key is that I have this one selected here, and then with shift and arrow down, I'm selecting both of them and setting them as a primary key. I'm going to do that again. I select one of them and I do shift arrow down to select another one. Or I can do select one of them and then with control and left click, I select more than one. And I set them as a, and so now both of them are going to be a primary key, or it's a composite primary key. Now I have all of my tables defined, but they're not related. The next thing I need to do is the relational model. The relational model is going to be this linking that I do between the employees and I'm sorry, between the primary keys and everything. So I'm going to go I'm going to go over here to database tools and I'm going to go to relationships. I'm going to go over here to relationships. And here in relationships, I'm going to be able to create the relational model to be able to relate each of the tables there. Okay, so now we're going to do the relationship. So we've got space here. Where we're going to be putting all of our tables, and so we've got the list of tables here. Here on the right, we're going to grab. We're going to grab each of these tables and we're going to bring them over here. This is going to literally look like the relational model again. It's going to be very similar to what we have over here. This is literally so this is why we're basing ourselves on the relational model. This is literally what we're going to be implementing in the software. So first we've got the employee table, then we've got the department table. We can set these up however we want. Then we've got the project table. Then we've got the employee project table down here. And we've got the dependent table down here. Okay, so we've got the 5 tables and we've organized them like that. The next thing we need to do is link up the corresponding attributes that relate to these. And so in the case of department ID, we've got the department ID here and we're going to relate it to department ID. We literally grab it from one to the other. And so department ID is going to be related to department ID. So that links it like that. I'm just going to click it here and it's going to force, and this is just going to give me the type of relationship. So the one to many is defined there. And we're just going to be linking everything up like we have it in the table. We've got department ID also linked up here. Project. Then we've got project here, the project ID.
We cannot move the arrow.
I don't think so. It's always gonna, no, that's something that's a little annoying about it. So no, it doesn't let us place it wherever we want. So it's gonna kind of do this. So we might try to make it exactly like we have it in the relational diagram, but Access is gonna do whatever it wants. Then what other links do we have? We've got the employee social security number with the department manager one here. Wait a minute. We've got the employee social security number with the employee social security number down here. Yeah. We could do it like that if we wanted it to not overlap. We've got the employee social security number over here with this one. It's gonna crisscross a few of them, so. A relationship already exists, so we're gonna do it here. So it's gonna be from department, it's the manager. And over here, it's gonna be the manager, okay? Department, did I erase that one? Oh, no, I've got it the other way around. Employee from department. Making a mess here. I'm gonna do this one again. So it's gonna be department ID. What's happening there? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I need to click. No, I was making a mistake there. What's happening here is that a relationship already exists with the table, so a replicate table is created. I was saying that I wanted to do the same one, and that's gonna create a problem. So let me do this one again, so it's clear. I'm gonna erase this. So I need to relate the department social security number. So I related the department ID and for financial integrity, and I have that. So I already have a relationship in this table. So if I'm going to create a new relationship, what I'm going to be doing is relating this one here. I don't want to edit I don't want to modify the existing one. So I'm going to create a new one. So this is going to be the new relationship. This isn't represented in the original relational diagram, but Access, if there's more than one relationship in a table, then it replicates the table. So we're going to have another employee table here. And the last one is the employee social security number with the employee, which is no, that's the last one. I'm sorry. Yep, that's the last one. We've got the relationship with the dependent. Organize this a little bit better. There we are. So this would be our relational model here. And again, this is going to happen. This is going to happen when we have more than one relationship in a table. Access is going to create or replicate another table for that. So this is going to be the relational model that's going to represent our database. Once we have this created, now we can start with the other steps, which is basically creating forms to input data, creating queries to access, update, and delete data, and reports, which is going to be the next steps that we're going to be doing. Okay, questions up to this point? This would be lab exercise, lab practice number 1. Okay, so basically what you need to do for lab practice or lab exercise number 1, I'm going to close this, is that for this, no, this is lab exercise 1 is for May 6th, it's for next week. Basically what you're going to do is that for this exercise, which is in the PowerPoint, the Hilltop Animal Hospital, which we already have the tables, you already have the table. You're going to use these tables here. You're going to create the database with these tables. The same thing we just did for the social. That's what you're going to do. And you're also You're also gonna do the same thing for your application project. So in your application project, you should have already identified the entities. You're gonna create the structure of the database. That's lab exercise number one. Okay, but that's for next week. And I'm gonna give you some time on Wednesday to do that. I'm gonna do the next part. I'm gonna do an example of forms, and I'm gonna give you some time on Wednesday so you can work on this lab exercise and ask questions. Okay? Okay. Questions up to this point? No? Okay. Bless you.